Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com.
From Mansur's on the Boulevard, we're out to lunch with Stephanie Regal. It's business, Baton Rouge style.
Hi, I'm Jim Inkster, filling in for Stephanie Regal, and welcome to Out to Lunch. If you subscribe to an online news service, you're used to getting notifications about news stories the algorithm thinks that might impact you. And in southeast Louisiana, we pretty regularly see variations on the headlines: sea level rise threatens coastline, or Louisiana loses a football field of wetlands per hour. If you like most people, you keep scrolling, or maybe you read the article, shake your head at the dire situation, and then shrug it off because, well, what can we do? The reason you can afford to take a laissez faire attitude toward our disappearing coastline and wetlands is because there are people who don't. There are people working every day here in Baton Rouge to preserve our piece of planet Earth, and one of those is Darius Bonton, the founder, owner, and principal of Bonton Associates. Bonton Associates is an engineering company focusing on designing and implementing infrastructure and transportation systems that allows us to build what needs to be built and get where we need to go without destroying the environment in the process. To the contrary, Bonton is all about delivering solutions to water and transportation issues that do more than just comply with environmental regulations. They actually improve our existing ways of life. Darius Bonton, welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
Out to Lunch.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you with us, sir. If you're looking for an organization whose name doesn't pull any punches, how about Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana? The coalition the title refers to is a wide range of organizations and people who partner to do an even wider range of activities to save our coast, from planting grasses and marshlands to giving expert advice to local, state, and federal organizations. The coalition is Louisiana's first statewide nonprofit organization dedicated to coastal restoration. Starting in 1988 and since March of 2024, Ethan Melanson is the advocacy director. Ethan, welcome to Out to Lunch.
Hey, Jim. Thanks so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have two fine gentlemen with us today. And Darius, the kind of water projects that your company works on are typically large infrastructure projects, large-scale projects, and your clients are, for the most part, I assume, major industries or municipalities.
Yes, sir.
And we're all aware that in southeast Louisiana, these kinds of water engineering projects are impacting our lives one way or another. There may be people listening to this who live in places near the water or whose family lives in places on the water. Their very existence is threatened. But these kinds of engineering projects usually happen without much fanfare, or, as I alluded to earlier, without most of us paying a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. So can you start us off by telling us specifically about a project you're working on that impacts us and we ought to know more about?
Sure. Thank you, Jim, again, for the opportunity to join you guys and chat for a bit. As you mentioned earlier, Bonton Associates is a professional services firm that's focused on bringing clarity to how communities invest in and manage critical infrastructure. And the way we think of our firm, it's two houses, two practices, the transportation practice, and then there's the water practice, which you alluded to there. And so our water practice focuses on wastewater, stormwater, and drinking water. So specifically about the stormwater side, our goal is to deliver value to our clients by planning and implementing projects that reduce flood risk and that also promote water quality compliance. And so since 2021, particularly here in Baton Rouge, we have been the program manager in charge of identifying, planning, and implementing stormwater maintenance projects. And so to date, we have implemented north of 1,500 repairs throughout the city. That's storm drain repairs, that's inlet repairs. We also oversee all of the channel clearing throughout the parish. We have facilitated the clearing of about 80,000 linear feet of streams here in the city. That's Wards Creek, Clay Cut Bayou, Dawson's Creek, Elbow Bayou, White Bayou, and we've removed probably 24,000. Last I spoke to our program manager, about 24,000 tons of vegetative debris from those channels, which obviously plays a critical role in allowing stormwater runoff to get out of the system. And there's other repairs that we do facilitate as well. So,
Very good.
yeah.
Ethan, we turn the page to you, and there's a famous story about 12th century Britain. The king sets his throne on the sand by the seashore and then commands the tide to stop rising. Of course it didn't, and his throne and royal robes got soaked by the rising ocean. And the power of this tale, and the point, is to suggest that even an all-powerful king is powerless in the face of nature. The Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana is doing everything it possibly can to hold back the tide and halt land loss. But as you know, we are by all extensions like the king. I'm sure you're going to tell me there are absolutely things we can do to stop land loss, but in the face of global sea level rise, which, whether you believe climate change is man-made or not, is actually happening, rather than trying to save the coastline, should we instead be preparing to live differently with a different coastline?
Thank you, Jim, for that question. And it's something that has plagued us for quite some time now that we're talking about land loss and erosion, and it's starting to impact communities. So we're seeing indigenous tribes in South Terrebonne being relocated further north. So that thought of moving folks higher up is happening. So it's something we have to actually pay attention to. And so while I want to say that, yeah, we have the answer to save the coast, we know that sea level rise, with climate change and things like that happening, we're in for it, and we're going to need multiple levels of defense for that. So some of that is trying to save our coast, trying to restore our coast. And when we talk about restoration, we're not just talking about putting back what used to be there, but actually reintroducing natural systems back to what created Louisiana in the first place. So an example of that is the Mississippi River. So we dammed it off. We put levees around it to make sure that it would flow the way we wanted it to. Mm-hmm. So we tried to play king there and demand where the tides go. And what we ended up doing was we ended up shooting all of the sediment that built Louisiana directly off the continental shelf. And we've been doing that now for just about 100 years, and it's really starting to show. You mentioned at the beginning of the program the football field of land every hour. So it's around a football field of land every 90 minutes that we're actually losing there. And so when you kind of put that into the scope of a football field every 90 minutes, that's massive land loss that we're having.
Last time I checked, that's 100 yards.
That is 100 yards.
And both of you gentlemen are from South Louisiana.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Darius, you're from the lovely hamlet of Jennings, right?
Small town, Jennings, Louisiana. Yes, sir.
And Ethan's from Thibodaux.
I am from the Bayou. That's right. Resident Cajun.
So both of you know about coastal erosion, about hurricanes, and about how Louisiana's affected. And now we're affected more than we once were because of a variety of factors, climate change being one of them, but we have fewer obstacles to get to the coast for storms. There's not the marshland because of the land loss that we just talked about. But how do you see this moving forward? I'm of an age a bit older than you. I'm confident it won't happen in my lifetime, but it might happen in yours. Mm-hmm. Darius?
So, great question. And Ethan, really to piggyback, your illustration of sediment and the value of sediment and how we're really, foregoing that value by damming off the river. We do have a portion of our work dedicated towards coastal protection. In particular, the Mid-Breton Sediment Diversion Project. We are part of that, the team doing the environmental assessment. And in particular, we're looking at water quality and the impacts of water quality that are caused by that would be caused by that sediment diversion project. So projects like that obviously help us to combat the effects of erosion, coastal erosion, but even more locally, erosion control from a local perspective, how we deal with construction sites, how we manage stormwater runoff from construction sites, how we go about shoring up revetments and embankments, using vegetation placed in the correct manner. All of that matters. Yep.
Darius is from Jennings, as noted. He's a licensed professional engineer, principal engineer of Bonton Associates, and has a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Southern University and a master's of business from Tulane. Now, Ethan joined CRCL recently. He has extensive experience working at the legislature, and the 2024 session was the first lobbying for coastal restoration. He's happy in his work, perhaps bringing a renewed sense of optimism and hope to the role, and his family history in our state is long and fascinating, which informs his passion for environmental issues. And getting back to the question as far as where we are and where we're going, are we in a dire situation?
Yeah, so we're at a critical point now. We, like I mentioned earlier, when we levied off the Mississippi River after the 1927 flood, at the time, we didn't fully understand what exactly what the impacts of that would be. We knew we were saving folks from annual flooding, from the devastating floods that happened and threatened New Orleans at the time. But we didn't know until sometime later that we were actually getting rid of a lot of our sediment that had helped build our coast and moved on. So here we are. We've lost a lot of land so far. If you look at maps comparing from 1930s, 40s, and 50s to today, the boot is starting to not really look like a boot anymore. It's starting to look a little like a deteriorated boot at the bottom. And the main spot where that's happening the most is in that Barataria estuary area. That is the fastest area losing land currently. But there's hope, right? There's hope on the horizon of things that we can do. Not only are there these giant mega projects that we're hearing about from the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion, we also have the CPRA master plan, which has for the next 50 years kind of the plan that's going to save our coast and restore our coast. We also have smaller things that are going on, like what CRCL is doing through our oyster shell recycling program, where we actually build reefs around structures in areas to help reduce coastal erosion, while also giving an opportunity for oysters to rebed in those areas and to do things like that. So there is hope, but we are at a critical point where we have to start putting our money and our resources where our mouths are to really save coastal Louisiana and protect us from storms.
Well, Ethan is not only a native of Thibodaux, his family's been in the area since the early 1700s when they arrived with Bienville. And as a child, I'm told you spent time playing in the woods and sugarcane fields and fishing at the family camp.
That's right. It makes me sound like Huckleberry Finn a little bit, but that's true. Growing up in Thibodaux, my mother's family is from Chack Bay and Vashtree, which is along the river and in between in the swamps between Thibodaux and the river. And my dad's family is from Thibodaux and also Houma. So I kind of, have that whole gambit of the southeast Louisiana where my family's from. I often make the joke, my people didn't immigrate to the United States. The United States kind of came to us, right? Because we were here long before then. We've been French, Spanish, all the way through. But understanding, and that's kind of where my passion comes from for this. A lot of people ask why I made the switch to coastal restoration, because previous to this I worked for the Department of Education doing legislative work for them. And the reason why is because I've always had this passion. I've seen things happen in my lifetime. So relatively young, I'm 32 years old. I remember when Highway 1 went all the way to Grand Isle, and it wasn't the elevated highway at the time. And now if you pass over that elevated highway and you look down to the right, you see Highway 1, and Highway 1 looks like a boat launch. It just submerges at some point. And so when people talk about seeing coastal changes and coastal erosion happening, when we stopped maintaining that because we had a better road, we saw the effects of what happened, and we saw the effects that storms have. So it's really a passion area for me because that's my culture, that's my people. We have a strong connection to the land.
You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Jim Inkster, sitting in for Stephanie Regal. I'm talking to Ethan Molossoff from the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana and Darius Bonton from Baton Rouge Water and Transportation Engineering Company, Bonton Associates. Now, Darius and his company are involved in various issues and challenges presented by the environment. In 2012, he was presented an opportunity to support the Baton Rouge Sanitary Overflow Program, which is a $1.6 billion program to upgrade sewage collection and treatment facilities in our city. The Clean Water Act, prohibits untreated sewage water to be discharged into natural water, and a consent decree mandated that Baton Rouge come into compliance. How is that working?
We completed work on the program. We were in partnership with Jacobs Engineers. Like you said, about $1.6 billion in total. The goal of the program was to increase capacity throughout the collection system so that we can handle, obviously, the increase in population since the system was constructed, but also to deal with the wet weather that gets into the system during storm events. And so that work was completed in large part at the end of 2018. And then beyond that, there is a mandate for us to assess a certain amount of infrastructure on an annual basis and to implement repairs on any defects that we find along the way. And so we are still supporting the city of Baton Rouge in that regard.
You were chosen as the program manager for the Baton Rouge American Rescue Plan Act Drainage Program, and that's certainly a major endeavor.
It was. That I alluded to that earlier. And our administration, chose to allocate some of the ARP funding to address a backlog of drainage system defects. And again, we felt like that was a prudent use of that money, and so we were fortunate enough to be selected to build that program, to stand it up. We implemented several construction contracts for pipe repairs, inlet repairs. I mentioned stream clearing. We also facilitate the repair of concrete lined canals. And so we log all of the defects. We scope the repair. We place it on work orders, and then we push those work orders out to contractors who go and implement the repairs. And we keep data and present that publicly so that everybody understands how that money's being spent and promote transparency.
And you're also diversified enough that you're even involved in sidewalk improvement, right?
Yes. So our transportation practice does support the Move BR program with projects for sidewalk improvement, multi-use paths. We do a lot of work with the DOTD in this regard, as well as other clients. We're doing some work down in Thibodaux, for example, the downtown Thibodaux project that we're working through DOTD on. So we cover all of that.
Well, Ethan, the state creates a coastal master plan for restoration and flood protection every few years, and CRCL is supportive of the science-based plan. But what's your take on the plans that are in the offing, and the big one that would involve trying to thwart what is an inevitable decline of the coast, that those who are supportive believe that this is a panacea, and others, like our lieutenant governor, say it's not going to work? What do you make of this?
Yeah, so there's plenty of discussion around the largest project in the master plan, which is the Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion Program project. And the lieutenant governor has shared his thoughts on it. But we really believe that the science is speaking on this. We've seen that a project like this can work. If you go further down the river a little bit on the side, further down Plaquemines Parish, you'll see a place called Neptune's Pass, which is a natural crevasse in the Mississippi River levee down there. The Army Corps of Engineers doesn't regularly maintain those levees because they're a little outside of the levee protection system, and really it's just to watch for navigation purposes. But the river naturally broke through, and the river started doing what the river was meant to do. It started building land. We saw that this completely uncontrolled hole in the levee started to deposit all of that sediment within Quarantine Bay. And from there, we're seeing now vegetation pop up, meaning that this land, which a lot of the opponents of the Mid-Barataria sediment diversion are saying that the river doesn't have enough sediment to do this anymore, that it can't do this anymore, and it can't sustain life. And so when you go out there on a boat, we take tours out there to show folks what it looks like, and there's wildlife living there. There's trees popping out of the ground. There's grasses. So we're actually seeing the river fill in Quarantine Bay, basically, and sustain life. And so we can mimic what the natural process can do through the mid-Barataria sediment diversion on the other side of the river where it's badly needed. There's a lot of discussion around the impacts that it'll have on fisheries and oyster fishermen in that area and the wildlife that lives there. And there are mitigation efforts that are put in place for that. The science is showing that while it will have impacts, it will have long-term successes to the mid-Barataria sediment diversion.
What has compelled you to stay in Louisiana, Darius?
To be able to make an impact on the place that has poured so much into me, and to be able to use the gifts that I've been given through education and the like, to be able to apply those to the benefit of my community is why I'm here.
And Ethan, a man of 32 years old, you've got options, but right now you're here, and it looks like you're ready to conquer the world if you can. Why?
Yeah, so Louisiana is a special place, right? I think when I worked at the Baton Rouge Area Chamber, there was a study, and we called it the stickiest place. And we don't just mean the humidity, right? If you leave Louisiana, odds are 93% of the time, I believe is the statistic, they come back. We come back to our home state. And we have our challenges, but when you're actually looking at it and thinking through it, if you don't want it at its best, or at its worst, you can't have it at its best. And Louisiana has cradled my family since the very beginning. This is where my people come from, where we draw strength from, where we've worked at the land and we've done all the things. And to walk away from that is not easy. And there's opportunities here for every Louisianan, and I hope that we can continue to keep our folks here and our residents here. So there's my little workforce plug for the lunch.
But we do have a dilemma. We have more people in our state who are native born than any other state, and yet we're losing population, which of course means that there aren't that many people coming to Louisiana, at least not in the same numbers as they are coming to other places. What can we do to address that?
That is the golden question, I believe, to answer. So back to when I was talking about the Baton Rouge Area Chamber, when I was there, I worked in talent management and recruiting folks here. I also was the president of Forum 225, formerly Forum 35, so very aware of the young professional mindset and trying to pull young professionals here. But as Louisiana, what we need to really focus on is how can we best serve our people? How can we best serve our citizens? Instead of doing all the fun sideline projects that the legislature and folks want to focus on, if we actually focus on fixing some of the things that we very badly need, I think you're going to naturally draw people here because we have such great things to offer. I mean, the Lieutenant Governor does an amazing job at going around and sharing what Louisiana has to offer. And I think if we can actually harness that and share that with folks and pull them in, but keep them here with sound policies and sound laws, we can really make a difference.
Darius, your company does business in Baton Rouge and Shreveport, and two distinct cities in the same state.
Yeah.
Do people have different attitudes?
You know, in our space, people we find, just want to see smart investments in their infrastructure, which directly correlates to their quality of life. They want to see traffic in a manageable state. They want to see the risk of flooding reduced. Obviously, they want to make sure that environmentally speaking, we're in a good place. We have clean water and access to. So I don't see a difference from one community to the next, but those things are important to all of us.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. In 1789, the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge published a poem called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And for those unfamiliar with the poem, you probably know a line or two from it, namely, water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. The poem's about a sailor stranded at sea, ironically dying from dehydration while being surrounded by water. The theme of the poem is nature's indifference to human suffering. Whether or not nature is indifferent to us, we humans continue to do our best to adapt to the elements and even downright defy them. We owe our existence in southeast and southwest Louisiana to past generations' willingness to drain swamps, build levees, and bounce back from hurricanes. In our current generations, it is the work of companies like Bonton Associates and organizations like the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana who are continuing to organize, design, and execute strategies for containing the power of nature that allows us to remain here and hopefully will for generations to come. Darius Baltaw and Ethan Molossoff, thank you for everything you're doing for the city of Baton Rouge and the state of Louisiana, and thank you for joining me today on Out to Lunch.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here.
My guests today on Out to Lunch have been Darius Baltaw, the founder, owner, and principal at Bonton Associates, and Ethan Molossoff, the advocacy director at Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana. We edited this show to fit into our time slot here on WRKF, and you can hear our unedited conversation and find out more about Ethan and Darius on the Out to Lunch Baton Rouge podcast. You can find and subscribe to the Out to Lunch Baton Rouge podcast on your podcast app and on our website, itsbatonrouge.la. If you want to know what we all look like, you can find photos from our show on itsbatonrouge.la and then also on our Out to Lunch Baton Rouge social media. Out to Lunch is a production of INO Broadcasting for itsbatonrouge.la and WRKF 89.3 FM. The producer of our show is Grant Morris. Our technical producer is Eric Merle. Our associate producers are Peter Raschuti and Ann Edelman. Today's show was engineered by J.T. O'Neill. I'm Jim Inkster. Thank you for joining me. Stephanie Regal returns next week here at Mansour's on the Boulevard to conduct more business Baton Rouge style on Out to Lunch.
Out to Lunch Baton Rouge is recorded live over lunch at Mansour's on the Boulevard in Baton Rouge. Mansour's is open for lunch daily 11 to 2, for dinner nightly, and for brunch on Saturdays and Sundays. Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. Mitchell Foreman wrote and performs all the music on Out to Lunch. You can hear Mitchell's music anywhere great jazz is sold or streamed, and at mitchellforeman.com. If you'd like to be part of Out to Lunch, to learn how your business or organization can become an Out to Lunch program partner, email info@inobroadcasting.com.